Alright, so let's get started. And yeah, so in the previous class, I talked about why we use JavaScript specifically for web development. Then we discussed what is the role of JavaScript, how do we use JavaScript, or what is the purpose other than adding interaction and all that. Yeah, making dynamic content is the primary or the main purpose in today's world, that we use JavaScript heavily for creating some dynamic content. And dynamic content is everywhere. Yeah. So we don't like static pages. Static in the sense the content which doesn't change or which cannot be even, it's not adjusted or we cannot update it dynamically. Yeah. So static pages, mostly examples will be some of the document website like this. Yeah. So this is static. Your college website is static website, right? So that also doesn't change. Sometimes yes, may change. They might have an admission form and then they might ask something, they might put some content. But the purpose of where web applications are used, where a front end is used, they are made for dynamic content. Content gets updated, content displayed from the back end, content is stored in the database. That's a dynamic content and it varies. I can update it in the database and suddenly it reflects in the UI. I told you we have a lot of libraries which actually have solving the problem of dynamic content creation. In that, React is one of the popular library. In today's world, you see front end, I think you can find React, yeah, everywhere, most of the things. But then there are, frameworks which are, I mean, getting evolved. Yes, there are quite some framework which are very near to React, which does almost same thing as React. Example would be Vue.js. Yeah, another one is Svelte.js. Angular is again another popular library from Google. Yeah, it's a framework. It started as a library, then they made it as a framework. And I told you, React is from which company? Meta. So all your Facebook and all is done using their website. See, you look at how these guys are actually, built. They have products. For their products, they have built their framework, and then later they have made it open source, so that even anyone like me and you can learn and also use in our own applications. Since they are, kind of industry leaders, they're all able to give their own framework to the community. They all open sourced it. Most of these front end frameworks are open sourced. Majority of them are open sourced. It's very less or very few, who are like proprietary, who belongs to a certain company. All right. So since our focus is React, and one other thing very important, I'll tell you now itself. If you learn any of this library or any one of the framework, it is very easy to, or I would say comparatively it will be easy, a lot easier to move to any new framework. Let's say you join a team, you get an assignment, there you're asked to do some different framework. Don't hesitate, because if you have learned one framework, it is very easy. So you will have mostly similar concept, or at least mostly similar problems you will be solving in a different syntax or with a different APIs. Okay, and don't stick to one framework, but learn one framework. Yeah, try to understand the framework very good. Yeah, yeah. Here, uh, as I told you, this is the official website of React.js, and this is the best website today we have, and this has all the updates, all the latest what is happening. Okay, so anything and everything about React first gets updated here because this is being maintained by the React official React team itself. They also have a big community support as I told you in the previous class. Yeah, so you will be able to get a lot of it. You will see a lot of things about React happening, the conferences happening. There are meetups happening every weekends. Okay, so a lot of people, you will be there available. Okay, more on that. Okay, so more on that later. So this is all possible if you learn this framework, if you understand what is this framework. To start with, we don't have to get into installation and all that. So let us get familiar ourselves with the concept of what is React and how does it look like. Then slowly I'll tell you how do we need an installation. Installation is only required, yeah, if you are working on local. For example, you know that all these days we were able to practice JavaScript online itself. We did not really need a local. It is very few instances where we thought yes, it is good. The experience will be good in local environment. Compared debugging experience will be good. Yeah, so you will know fully everything and all that. So the same way, yeah, for React, so we'll use some editor called as an online editor called similar to CodePen. It is called as Code Sandbox. What is a online playground? This is also called as online playground. Uh, this is free. Okay, it's a free one. You can actually try it. You here you get a lot of frameworks support. You see, you can start React. You can see JavaScript, HTML, CSS. So we will start off with React. Okay, so here the first template which is popular, and yes, you can open this template, and this is where we can actually practice most of the React part of it. You really don't need till we get to know. So now for all the practice which I'm going to talk after this, yes, we just need this, and then here itself we can actually practice. So we get a full environment where we can run the application. Right? Yeah, this is in terms of editor, and that's why. So I'm not going to talk much on the installation now itself. Yeah, and installation is also a bit easy only. So for that we need to learn what is Node.js and npm a bit. Okay, so with that said, so I'll be mostly covering whatever is there in this website. We'll go through each and every section which is listed and that you need to know. We will see a lot of examples which they have given here, and that's how we learn to use React. Yeah, as I have been saying, it's a JavaScript library. Purpose is to create UI, user interfaces. Why? So we cannot create user interface as I told you with just HTML. HTML is not dynamic. That's where React has come up with its own framework or its own APIs to make our life easy. Yeah, using the React APIs. React basically provides a lot of APIs actually. Yeah. So now through this React, we will see how to load that library and start to use React's features actually to make the UI or to build the UI. Yeah. So in UI, so using React, it's again, as I told you, it's a component-based architecture, which means we create or we kind of put all these elements that we generally see on the web page into a component so that we can nest them, we can actually reuse them heavily. Okay, all right. So I think the first concept that we need to understand in React is what is called as a component. What is it? It's a component. So though the term is somewhat new to us because we have moved from JavaScript, we did not have a concept as component. So in React, it is actually called as a component. So now let me tell you, going back to our FiApp.net, and then to tell you what are some of the components. Let's say you open this page up, so we can see a lot of things here actually. Correct? We see a lot of HTML elements which are actually displayed on this page. Now the React itself, the React says it's a component-based architecture, which means instead of putting everything or all the UI thing into one page, so we just said components are more usable. Components are more, you know, uh, kind of they'll help you, uh, you know, compose. Yeah. So let's say I have to build one page, right? I have to build, you know, for example, even in this card itself, image can be one component. This whole thing can be one component. The card, correct? This full thing, yeah. This title, the image, the description, this button itself is one component. This itself is a one component actually in React. The button itself is one component. So likewise, we will have, you know, simple components and composed components also. For example, now card. So this title can be one component. This image can be one component. This paragraph can be a component, and button can be a component. Put together, all this can be a component. Now, so as a starting or to begin with in React, we will understand how to create this component. Now tell me, if this is a component and so on so, what will be their part of that component? Yeah, what is their part of the component? Obviously, it will be these elements. If at all, if I have something like a title as one component, then I'll have to put okay some h1 or h2. If image is a component I'm making, then I have to put an image tag. Similarly here some tag. Similarly here some tag. So part of the component I will have these elements. But in React we call we group those tags or we put together a specific tags, yeah, and then we call that as a that piece of code as a component. Yeah, that's a fancy term React uses. But these components, in terms of appearance, they almost appear like a JavaScript function. It is a JavaScript function. It's not like appearing, it is a JavaScript function. But the syntax doesn't look like that. In the first go, for you, it doesn't look like, okay, it is a JavaScript function. Why? Because see, within a JavaScript, we will never be able to write an HTML like this. But I think slowly we'll understand, yes, this is also JavaScript. What is written here is also JavaScript, but this is a declarative syntax that we are given. Behind the scene, React will actually convert this also into JavaScript. But that's fine. Okay, so now what are we doing here? I said in React, a component, yeah, a component is also, yeah, it's a you can find it's a JavaScript function. How do we create JavaScript function? Okay, looks like they're not helping me to edit it. Yeah, interesting. I think this is something new I didn't observe, but this is good anyhow. So I can just give me a second. I think I'll also have to do a sign in. Just a minute. And one other thing that we have around now using it, we can directly use even the the official website itself. Official website allow us to edit. But now let me show you some more examples. I'll show you on that website also how do we edit it. Yeah. Uh, with that said, let's move on. I think now I'll be allowed to edit. Yeah. So what did they say? So we have something called a function. So let's say a function, and that has a profile. Let's create a title. Okay. So let's create a title as, okay, and this is a syntax. So what we are seeing is React component is actually a JavaScript function. And then we will have to return something from that function. Now let's say this title is, okay, I would like to keep h2 as my title, and here I'll say, okay, this is a title. For now I'll keep some placeholder text called as this is title. Yeah. Looks like I have some issues running. Okay, this code sandbox actually I think running into some issues. Okay. Mhm. Let me reload it. Let's see if I can create a total new one because I have not yet saved. At times I think code sandbox will have, I mean they used to run into issues. I still see they have challenges or they have problems. Fine. See, now it is running. I think yeah. So thing is, I created a component. I'm writing this just to show you how simple is a component actually. Yeah, this is a component. Function title is a component. What else? Assume I want to create a button as a component. Okay, my button itself is a component. So what will be there within the button component? Yes, obviously it has to be something like this button, or it could be input type button. Yeah. Now, so in JavaScript, we know that we can define functions like this, but in React, these functions are actually acting as a component. Yeah, this is a component one, and this is also a component one, two, but both are component. Now, do you see these two are displayed on the screen? They are not displayed, correct? So, like if at all I have a function, it won't execute by itself, correct? I have to call this somewhere. I have to invoke this somewhere. So in React, if at all I have a component and I have to run that component or I have to display that component, we call it displaying the component or rendering the component. It has to be rendered somewhere to see what is the UI it is creating. What is the UI this button is creating? To see that I have to render this component. Now how do I do that? Yes. So I can go into this app. There's a div. So let me put, okay, this title actually. So look at the syntax. How do I write this title? Okay, this is the title. See, how do I display button? Just like a self-closing HTML tag. Okay, I am writing this particular syntax to render the button and render the title. So since my focus is now title and I am not interested in this h1 and h2, I'll just remove it because that was a default code which is given by code sandbox. Yeah, in simple words, these are the syntax for creating button. And components, I mean the component, sorry, not the button. Components will have, will return UI. Okay, they'll have a view part of it. Components will have a view part of it, and that we have to write it within the return or after the return statement. And if there is a component, yeah, just like how we invoke a function, so we have to render this because this has some UI in it. This also to be rendered, some UI in it. Few minutes back, we understood that these components can be reused. Components, you know, So let's say you want one more title, I can put title. I want one more button, I can put one more button. So one can be a submit button, the other can be a clear button. And components are the basic building blocks of any React application. Which means if I have to, create a React application, yes, we end up creating components actually. Component is where it does have both the the UI, uh, the UI part or the content, and also it will have the data part. In addition to this display, component does hold what is called as the data also. This data we use a special term called as state, just like how we call this as a component. So the data, yeah, of each of the component, yeah, we kind of hold it in terms of what is called as a state, or by using state variables. Okay, so with that, let's move on. Okay, this is how we create a component. So don't worry on the syntax and what it is and how it to use. For now, you understand, okay, this is how it looks like. Okay, and you see, same component can be rendered within another component. Within another component, we are rendering it, yeah, by mentioning it how many ever times we want, but we are using a syntax which is very similar to HTML tag, but a self-closing HTML tag. So in terms of syntax, yes, it is possible to have both. Let's say I can write a button and then a closing button. Just like HTML tag, we write opening and closing tag. This syntax also works, or a self-closing syntax also works. Now, one important observation you have to make while creating a component is the the name of this function. We, as a convention, we use uppercase letter. Yeah, we use an uppercase letter to create the component. Yeah, you see here also uppercase. You see they've given default, that's also uppercase. It's a standard naming convention. You create any component. Yeah, just make sure you do a capitalized case, not like a kebab case, or not the kebab, the camel case. Yeah. So in JavaScript we mostly use camel case, but here we use capitalized case, which means first letter of every word will start with an uppercase letter. Every word. Yeah. So now these components are composed in one component like this, and then we create the whatever piece of UI we would like to create. For example, amazing scientist is the title, okay, which we have put an H1, and then we have three scientist photo we have put. In this case, it happens to be same, but we will see how we can replace different scientist photos. Yeah. So this piece of UI is composed of components, right? This is one component. This is one component. This is one component. Okay, moving on. So there's a concept of importing and exporting components. So what it simply means, and this is actually done using again the JavaScript feature of importing and exporting modules. What is the concept? Importing and exporting modules. So there is also in detailed chapter is there. There we will discuss more on this importing and exporting. So for now, all you have to understand is, if at all I write a component in a different file, if at all I write a component in a different file for better code organization, yeah, rather than writing everything clumsy and keeping it in one go, I can put them into respective file. Button one separate file, title is one separate file. That is how we write React code. We follow a rule of one file per component. In that case, we need to export from here and then we have to import it in the target where I have to render this component. So hold on for some time because we'll have a topic of import and exporting. Now, writing markup with JSX. Yeah, important and a topic or a concept that we need to know. I spoke about this word JSX already. JSX stands for JavaScript extension. Yeah, and it is a syntax which is a lot like HTML. H1 is also there in HTML. In JSX also we have H1. If at all I am writing this syntax or using this H1 within the component, that means it is not HTML. Though syntax looks like this, it is not HTML. This syntax is called JavaScript extension. So we'll understand what is it, why it is called extension and all that. But for now, any UI, yeah, any UI logic that you have, anything that you want to display in React, we use the syntax called JSX syntax. We call that as JSX syntax. And this JSX syntax is a strict syntax compared to HTML. Okay, it is a much stricter syntax, which means HTML will not even throw any error if I do a miss the closing tag. HTML will not throw an error even if I sometimes miss this angle bracket to be closed. But React is not. I mean, no, React's JSX syntax is not like that. And you will see that going forward when we start working with components, you will understand. Okay, how different it is. And the purpose of see why React is using JSX. It can display dynamic information, unlike HTML. HTML cannot. HTML don't have a conditional logic. HTML does not support if or looping statements or conditional statements, expressions, function calls. So many things HTML is cannot do it. So with the help of JSX, we are able to do it. And JSX is is a purely a syntax. It's not a separate language. It's not one more language we are learning. It's purely a syntax. Okay, syntax, and that almost looks like HTML for us to write, but behind the scene, this is all JavaScript. Okay, we'll understand more on this. Yeah, how this is all, you know, HTML behind the scene. Now, whatever the HTML tags, yeah, all those are supported in JSX. It's not like some tags are supported. So most of the tags are supported, and there are some differences actually. But we will understand more on this. Yeah. So you see, this is throwing an error. Yeah, this is throwing an error because you know you should have one common element. You cannot have h1 image, ul, everything without a common parent element. For example, now I'll add a section to this as one common element, and now you see it starts working. That's the error it was saying. Unterminated JSX content 15. Uh, okay, there is a ul. Yeah, you see image tag is, though it's a self-closing tag, it is not self-closed properly. Yeah, so li does not have closing tag. You see this lis does not have a closing tag. So this is what earlier I was saying, in this website also we can directly edit and see the syntax. We can practice a bit here also, right? Interesting, right? Saying unexpected token 15.4. Have li, all the li's closed. Okay, Yeah, yeah, I think it was a bit of re-rendering problem. You see now this? Okay, it is saying invalid DOM property class. So do you mean class name? Morning we try to use class name if you remember in JavaScript itself for a DOM. Since this JSX is actually made out of JavaScript, so specifically for attribute like class, we should use the class name, not as class. But so JSX is like this. You saw it's a working HTML. Okay. Let's say if I take the same HTML, whatever it displayed, assuming like this is an HTML, it is going to start working for me. You see, I'll just copy paste this into a code pen. Let me show you. I'll copy paste this whole part into an HTML code in a code pen. You will see that it suddenly starts working. So there's no problem. Yeah, there's no problem in displaying this HTML, correct? Because HTML is like that. Now what we saw just now is the React JSX is not like that. So that syntax doesn't, you know, render this, though it has a lot of, you see, HTML, no problem at all. It is working. We got the output. But React says every tag should be closed. Either if it is a self-closing tag, then do a self-closing. If it has both opening and closing, you close it. This is one thing. We fixed LIs, correct? We fixed LI. It said there is an opening tag, then there must be closing tag. So HTML is not like that. HTML said, okay, you put LI, then yeah, it is listing. You got these bullet points also. Image also you got displayed. So in this kind of aspect, JSX is a strict syntax. Why? It again needs to be converted into a JavaScript. If you don't have a proper opening, closing, and the proper attribute, even yeah, class was not supported, you had to replace with class name. This is how the markup that we use in React, which is called JavaScript extension, differs from HTML. We will, I think, so this is kind of a quick overview of what all is there now. Okay, we are not in detail going with all the syntax. Now we are just getting to see how to build this component or what goes inside a component and how it is different. Okay, so yeah, mostly an overview of things we are actually getting. Okay, let's move on. Yeah, don't worry. And like, okay, what is the syntax and why it is JavaScript in JSX with curly braces. Okay, so what exactly you're trying to understand here? Let's say, you know, I have some data, and what exactly is this? You know the syntax already. It's an object. It's a pure JavaScript object I can see. It has key value pair, correct? It has a key value pair. Now, what is that we are trying to understand from this is through this example, we are trying to understand how we can have some dynamic content displayed. Okay, some dynamic content which is being displayed on the page. How in the JSX, how we can actually replace some of this. So let me show you what exactly it's happening here. So I'll copy this example, or maybe I think I'll zoom a bit. I think I, I I suggest their team if they can give a full screen support. Actually, I think it will be a very nice feature so that we can just zoom or focus this one example itself to understand. But anyhow, they have given a fork, which means I can open this example in a separate code sandbox. That feature they've given. Yeah, I think some of you understood what I'm exactly talking about. Yeah, to see that example in full screen view like this within that page itself. Okay, so no worries. Here we got that example. Let's see how this is looking like or what exactly is there in this. I'm going to increase this a bit, zoom a bit. See, we got a plain object called person. So within the components, yeah, JSX syntax, instead of hard coding it, we can actually take all the values from this object. So for example, person.name. Yeah, I could have written hard coded here. You see, but you know, I could have hard coded it, but now it is coming from an object. Now, if at all I have data in an object like this, to display it, we use curly brackets like this. This curly bracket, what we use for object, it's the same curly bracket we use. Here it is not an object. Yeah, this syntax is also called as interpolation syntax. Meaning, so I have data and I'm just directly, I want to display it within the HTML. I just pass it to this attribute person.theme, person.name, correct? For example, here alt is there. Again, it is coming from where? From person.name. Why to hard code here actually? I can again put here person.name only. That's alt value which we are using for the image. Yeah. So likewise, we can use this the object, the literal syntax or the curly braces to interpolate these values, which is nothing but expanding that values here. Now you update something here, then automatically it is also going to take a the updated value. Yeah. So let's say person, uh, yeah, some name I put. See, it started updating here. Why? Because I'm referring these values and with the syntax, yeah, with the syntax, this syntax, the curly braces syntax, yeah, we just understood using curly bracket, we can actually display some content on the page from a from an object like this. Yeah. So this is something like, okay, creating a template dynamic. You update this object, then this is going to update. It is it is better because it is not hard coded. Data is not hard coded. Right? So next thing, passing the props to the component. What exactly we are seeing? Passing the props to the component. I think I'll not go into this. I think we'll looks like this is just an overview of each and everything. So we will stop at passing props. Okay. So first we will revisit each of this concept in detail. Okay. We will revisit each of this concept in detail. So which is mostly here. So your first component, this is there as a dedicated page. Okay. So here in describing the UI, the main things we come across is creating components, borrowing components from file, writing JSX, yeah, and JavaScript curly braces for that we use in JSX. And these are some of the additional things that we will learn with respect to making UI, or that is what is there in actually React as a library. Earlier I told you, remember? So React is all made to create this UI elements. The 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 complete API is built to create the UI elements. Okay, so now let us see the component a bit in detail. So far, we just saw a glimpse or few examples of how does a component look like. Syntax wise, it is a function, JavaScript function syntax. Yeah. And what exactly is a component? Yeah. So we'll understand what is a component is, the role of component in React application, how to write in terms of syntax of this component. I told you components are the UI building blocks. UI is nothing but the user interface, the page. Okay, so to build that page, we end up using like components, just like how we use bricks to construct a house or a wall. Yeah, so same way components are like this. Now, yeah, so we saw the syntax already. So JSX, and this is what is part of the component. Yeah, okay. So in a React component, yeah, in a React component, we use this markup syntax. Yes, you can use along with the CSS. Yeah, and also JavaScript. Okay, so we can use both CSS and JavaScript within the component, and these elements, these are actually JSX elements, though they appear like HTML. So we use them. On top of that, here they're saying it is possible to reuse and compose also. You see, now there's a component they have created for page layout, they have created a component for search bar, they have created one component for link itself, sidebar, page content. So the entire page is also made of fully components. Each component again has its own component syntax and its own JSX also. Yeah. So in a bigger project, we end up creating hundreds of components. Yeah. Even a complete page is also made as one component. Full one page. For example, your first component. This whole piece is actually made using one component. And that might have a lot of child components. Okay, so let's understand a bit more on defining the component. Yeah, as I told you, it's a function, and the name of the function will be written, yeah, in a capitalized case, which is nothing but each word starts with a capital letter. And then if at all this component is defined in a separate file, then we do export that component, and then we do import also. And this exporting and importing, not to confuse, it is not part of React syntax. Rather, it is actually part of, you know, which syntax? It is a part of the JavaScript syntax. It's a part of standard JavaScript concept. Maybe I think I have not yet talked about it. Yeah, it is waiting for one video. I think we will describe more on that. But just to tell you, so we have this chapter called modules in JavaScript. What's the concept name? Modules in JavaScript. That's where we understand what are modules, what is an export, import. For now, hold on to this. I think soon we will discuss this topic. Then you will get familiar with what is this export and default. In simple, to better organize the components, we split into multiple files. I said the rule says per component, I mean one file per component. Now using a component, yes, how do I use? I have to render. Yeah, I have to render this component. Let's say I want one more profile. I simply have to put profile with a self-closing tag. Likewise, I can go on adding this component. Again, you see one component we are putting within the JSX of another component. We are not putting anywhere. We cannot put above this return statement. And JSX is written within this return. Previously, I showed you a syntax. Okay, I can just I can just write one h1 directly here. See, here itself we will be able to get practice. No need to get into the code sandbox itself so early. Now let's say I have two tags or two or more elements to be displayed. Then we will use the parenthesis bracket. And here, yeah, here I can add another set of elements like another, let's say I want to add a button. I can put within that two parentheses, I'll say getting started with React, then close that button tag. Now we get an error that okay, adjacent elements or adjacent JSX element must be wrapped in a enclosing tag. So for that we have a lot of options. So maybe for now I'll just put, I mean, one simple div so that both the elements are having a common parent element. You see now? So whatever I have declared here, those elements are exactly there in the output. Correct? So return, within the return, whatever we are returning the UI piece, that is what is displayed when this component gallery is displayed or rendered within the application. All right. Now, so let's say if I'm doing React like this, and if I inspect this, what do I do? I inspect this. What do I see? That's a question they're actually answering now. Okay, fine. You did this. All fine. Okay, all fine. But then, now what do I see if I inspect it in the browser? What do I see for this? Though I use the title component. This is the title component, correct? See, what do you see? Do you understand? Okay, is there a title component around it? No. Do you see this is an app component? No. Do you see this is a button component? No. So you will see purely an HTML which is being displayed here. Yeah, pure HTML is being displayed. That's what you see when you inspect in the browser. So browser will not see them as a React component. Rather, browser will see that they are pure HTML elements which are actually displayed. Just a second. So guys, so with this basically, I'm back. So what we are trying to understand is, okay, what is a component, what is the purpose of component, how does a component syntax looks like, since we are just coming from JavaScript. Yeah, we're also trying to see, so if I inspect this component at the end, what does browsers are rendering. Yeah, so we saw it's a pure HTML, there is no difference. But then what is the magic the React has done? So in the React, I have just declared what I want. I have told, okay, how what should my view look like, and the same thing has actually been created for me. So morning we understood, okay, if at all I have to do a similar creation using JavaScript, it is going to take a lot of code. Then I have to rely on what is called as the DOM APIs. But now this is also purely JavaScript because I told you this component itself is a JavaScript. This whole thing is a JavaScript. For us, it is appearing like HTML, but this is a special syntax called JSX, which is a JavaScript extension syntax. Okay, so now, okay, so with this understanding of component, yeah, nesting and organizing, yes, it is possible to, you know, put one component inside another component. Yeah, that's how we build it. So the just like how we have a real DOM or the, in the browser whatever DOM we see, so we have one parent element which is there, which is nothing but the HTML, which is a root of our HTML. Underneath we have a lot of other elements like head, the body. Yeah, so the React components, the components also follows a somewhat similar hierarchy. So you will have one root component, and if there's a new component, it has to be displayed underneath that root component or anywhere in the tree actually. Yeah, component cannot exist independently. They have to be under the component tree. And for that, we use what is called as nesting. All right. So yeah, just to recap a bit what is given here. Yeah, you just got a taste of how they look like or what we will actually be dealing with when it comes to React as a library. And so using the React's JSX and all, so we saw how to write our piece of UI. Yeah, and these components basically, yeah, are built out of JavaScript function. Their names always begin with capital letter and they return JSX mark. We also saw a bit about exporting a component if at all it is part of a different file and importing it. I've not spoken about much on the syntax, but then you will understand this is a purely a JavaScript concept. It has nothing to do with React. And don't worry, all the syntax will get familiar because we have that many challenges to do, or we will get familiarized if we start doing some, you code challenges. Okay, I think we'll stop here for this theory and let's continue